Now, let's just remind you of the story. The task of the Judicial Service Commission is to select fit and proper candidates for appointment as judges. It also has to investigate complaints about judicial officers. New judges have been interviewed to see if they are fit in the JSC. Now, it was meant to be happening today. We spoke about that just before 8 o'clock with our reporter, Lukhanyo Calata, who is at Parliament, but he's just heard some news that this actually is not going to be going ahead today. Lukhanyo, what's happening?
Morning, Leanne. It has a lot to do with what's expected to take place in Parliament today. As you know, MPs, or at least Parliament, is now back in session after the Easter recess. So MPs are back, and there's a big debate and vote taking place this afternoon that has to do with the removal of President Jacob Zuma following the judgment of the Constitutional Court last week. So MPs are quite busy, and some of them obviously sit on the Judicial Services Commission. So they can't obviously cut themselves in half. So then I think the decision was then taken that Parliament and the activities and the requirements of Parliament must come first. So that's where the MPs are, which means that the Judicial Services Commission sat till after 12 o'clock last night, obviously as they were trying to make up for the time that will be lost today. And they're going to sit again from tomorrow onwards, from about 8:30 in the morning, right up until 8 o'clock at night, to obviously, again, once make up for the time that is lost today. Okay. Leanne?
All right. So everything that was meant to be happening today is now going to be happening tomorrow. That's basically all that's changed.
That's basically all that's changed, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Just give us a sense of exactly what. I know you have spoken to us, but for viewers that have just tuned in, what is this process all about?
Leanne, it's the Judicial Services Commission, as you pointed out in the intro, they're tasked with the responsibility to choose the men and women who then sit on the country's benches, as magistrates, judges, even in the Constitutional Court. And twice a year, the Judicial Services Commission sits to fill vacancies across the country on the bench. And this one is the first round of interviews for the year. They were supposed to interview, or they are supposed to interview, at least 34 candidates for about 14 available positions around the country. And it's just basically for them to come in and to interview the judges, make recommendations, forward their recommendations to the president, and then the president is the one that then signs those appointments. Leanne?
All right, so that's pretty much the whole session. And the public, do they get involved at all in the selection process?
Well, not in the selection process, Leanne, but the public, the hearings, the interviews are open. And the public can, of course, they can comment in it, but the eventual decision is then left up, obviously, to the Judicial Services Commission. I'm sure that's probably what you meant. Maybe I just misunderstood your question. But yes, the public can comment on the judges. They can go, they can sit in the interviews, and then once you've obviously had a listen to what Judge A says and what Judge B says, you can write into the JSC and comment on your preferred candidate, and I'm sure the JSC will then take that into consideration when they decide on which names to forward to the president.
Yeah. Quite interesting, though, to have a look at the amount of spots that are available. And we were talking a total of 14 vacancies, which includes a Constitutional Court vacancy, and 34 candidates were eventually shortlisted for this position. Now, I mean, we just go back to last week and the judgment handed down just in the President Jacob Zuma and Kandla issue. I mean, that just shows the extent of that court and the control, the influence, and the independence that we're talking about in these courts. So, I mean, a position up at the Constitutional Court as well.
Leanne, I think it shows just how important the judiciary is in general. And I think as South Africans, we need to be a little bit more active and be a little bit more considerate as to just who exactly are the magistrates in our country, who exactly are the judges in our country, because we've obviously seen over the last couple of days just how important their decisions are to the country, both present and, of course, going into the future. And I think what this round of JSC interviews is doing is essentially just making sure that we as South Africans, we must take an active interest into who these people are that are appointed into these positions. And yes, it's not just the Constitutional Court, but also the magistrates in the lower courts, and also judges in the higher courts, such as the High Court in the Western Cape, or even the Supreme Court of Appeal, Leanne.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just on a closing note, Minister Michael Masuta, I mean, he's split at the moment, isn't he? I mean, he's got to be with the JSC, he's got to be in Parliament. I mean, in both late night meetings. I mean, it's a bit of a tough time for the Justice Minister right now as well. I mean, having to almost divide himself. So one can understand why everything has been delayed until tomorrow.
I suppose that's why he gets paid the big bucks.
All right, you said that, not me.
But I can imagine it must be very tough for him over this period. With everything that's going on, Leanne. And yes, I think that is to a very large extent the reason why the interviews were postponed by the JSE today, because obviously the minister can't be in two places at the same time, as well as some of the other MPs. For instance, EFF leader Julius Malema sits on the JSE. So, and I'm sure they much rather prefer to be in Parliament today with everything that's expected to go down here today.
Absolutely, it certainly is. Lukhanyo, thank you so much for joining us here on the program, just for clarifying exactly what's been going on. And it's quite interesting. So, as you say, Julius Malema is part of that. Also, IFP Chief Whip Naran Singh is a part of it, DAMP Hendrik Schmidt, and the House Chairperson Toko Didiza, and our Justice Minister. So, I mean, they're all going to be missing. That's why it's moved till tomorrow. Lukhanyo Calata, parliamentary reporter, will update you again tomorrow. I'm sure we'll chat to you then. Thanks, Lukhanyo.
Pleasure.
Right, let me just